I don't get just one disc, I get 3 of everything. And from the very beginning, I knew how important these samples were. And so Daryl Lind, who was the first employee of the PDGA, the first PDGA administrator, he told me when I started, well, one benefit of doing this as a volunteer is that you get to keep the discs. But I knew how important they were, so I made sure I saved 1 set for the PDGA, so they have them. They do them regularly. They have all 80 boxes in storage right now. So usually the first thing I do is mark the disc. I've already done that. I put the date and the name of it on. And usually I just follow through this form and do it in order.
He knows what iteration.
And I've done it differently. Sometimes, I have multiple discs. Sometimes I would try one standard and go one to the next, but I find it's easier for me just to finish one form and get it done, do everything, and it works pretty efficiently. But the first thing I do is the diameter.
I can answer most of the questions we have. Some of them are obvious. Most of them fills because he wasn't flying the airplane the way I was flying the airplane.
I always used to just do it twice, but Chuck Kennedy, when he was on Tech Standards, he said I needed to do it at least 3 times because you could have a square that 2 times would come out the same, but it's not round. So that would really work. But sometimes they're distorted slightly, not that often, but sometimes you'll get a millimeter or so difference one way versus the other. So I do it different ways. But, so let's say 21.4 on that. Remember that number and I'll write it down. Yeah. It's kind of between 21.4 and 21.5, but it's closer to 21.4. So that's the number I'm going to go to. And I round if it's right in the middle. I mean, at 0.5, I'll round up. For one exception, though, certain tests, if by rounding, that's what allows it to pass, then I don't go by rounding. If it's too small in diameter, and I can measure it fairly accurately, it doesn't pass. The second thing I always do is the height of the disc. And I'm using the same, so this is number 1. And that's why I like these tree calipers. These are designed for measuring the diameter of trees. They make bigger ones. It comes out of Scandinavia. And anyway, it's a good machine, or a good tool. I think I paid $80 or $90 for it. But now, what are they now?
The new reverse is about $150.
Yeah, that's what I thought because I looked it up.
And they come in blue.
Yeah, I've seen it. They made some changes. So really, when I do this at home, I typically aim this to where lights come in from my window so I can see right when it touches to the light. So when it first touches, that's what I go with. So it's 2.1.
It's fun stuff.
This one's 1.9. They do vary. Sometimes even.
You can see it was flatter from back here.
Pardon?
You could see it was flatter from back here. The first one, the second one.
That's 1.9. So it's going to be 1.9. I'm going to write them all down. I bring my calculator. The other thing is, a lot of these numbers I have memorized, but there really aren't that many discs that are 21.4. So you multiply that times 8.3, and you get the weight limit. We round off to the 10th. So it's 177.6 grams would be the weight limit for this disc.
And some of all the fuel players, there are some aberrations. These are hard things to get.
I have one you don't have.
Okay, the next one is rim depth. And on that one, I just start off with a ruler because I can eyeball it, but if it really gets close to the limit, I'll switch to these calipers. If I really need a more accurate measurement, that's not really good.
It's the only one down there that is. It was patented in 1957.
quite get that in there.
So that's an add-on to this caliper.
Yeah, but I actually found it where they both came together, but it'll work on a lot of other ones.
Basically, a Kuba platter, everything is just it's exactly translated.
Okay, there we go. I didn't have it on there right.
Nobody knows of anyone.
Actually, I don't think it's going to be an issue with this disc, but I'll still show you how to use that one. But really, all I do is take a metric ruler and try to tell within a tenth of a centimeter or a millimeter or what it really is. So,
I got a hold of it.
okay, one thing to tell you on this, where's the point that I measure to? Most discs, it's pretty straightforward. There's a fairly discrete line between the rim and the flat plate. But not all discs are, so what do you do if it's rounded over 3 or 4 millimeters? Because if I went to the top of that, then it's not going to pass sometimes, and if I went to the bottom, it's adding more than it really is. What I came up with as a rule of thumb is I try to go to the middle of that arc to measure to the depth. So this is something that you really don't need to test for each individual disc, but it's 1.4.
Antiques for
I've done this over and over. I know that they're not going to vary in between that. They're all going to be less than, they'll probably be within a tenth of a millimeter or so.
To me, that's the best way to do it.
Then I do inside rim diameter. For that one, I use these calipers over here. And I'll tell you what, I could measure outside diameter too with these, but the reason I don't is because sometimes where it gets pressed in, you can actually slightly warp it and not know that you're doing it. I actually get a better measurement with that. But for the inside rim diameters, you have to have these. You get it zeroed in millimeters. Hold it where you can see it. I normally just do it like right on my lap, but first I just put it on one side at that point, and then I pull it over across.
the only color purge in America.
So 18.7 round off. Check it the other one.
And that's great.
Yeah, that one still is 18.7. It's a little less, but it might not have been on. I do these multiple times, so I'm really happy with the numbers. So I'd say 18.7.
Yeah, so there's still things being discovered.
Realize that we could find that. He sends me pictures.
Then the next thing I measure is the rim thickness. Some people think it should be width, and I mean you can call it different things. I don't like width because I don't know, it'd be the narrowest part of the rim to me. And
That's what we do.
we've called it rim thickness, but one thing is if you multiply the rim thickness times 2 and add the inside rim diameter, they should sum to what the total outside diameter, or you didn't measure it right, or you had a rounding error or something. So a lot of times I can tell if I made a mistake. Just do the math. So do the rim now. Try to show you here. I just stick it right there, and then I'll push in right when it touches. That's what I go. This one's 1.5 centimeters. We probably should use millimeters, but we don't really. Some of these measures I probably should change to that, but it's almost the same. But anyway.
But I still have heard a bunch because I was figuring out.
What did I say that was?
1.5.
Huh?
1.5?
Yeah, that's right. It's still on there. 0.5.
Don't say 2.5 now, then you have a problem.
Okay, there I know I have a little bit of a problem because if I multiply that times 3 and add it to 18.7, I come up 3 millimeters higher than my diameter. So I know I had some error, so I'm going to go back and check it a little bit better. They won't always sum exactly to the outside diameter because you can get rounding errors, but it should be within a millimeter. If I'm not within a millimeter, then I know it's a mistake, and I'll redo it. And when you'll double check things a lot is if they fail, I want to make darn sure that I'm right, that they really did fail. I don't want to tell them that it failed when it didn't. So those I'll really double check.
So
We'll check that again.
2 of those, and since then,
Yeah.
the 13.
I might have been off on the inside. It was closer to
They used to
18.6.
send us a lot of this in the summer to go to
Still 18.7.
because we had a short breeze. So all the record job was
18.7.
So
Is this really 1.6?
so
1.5?
we get lucky, right? Sometimes we're luckier than smart.
Yeah, I'm not happy with that.
I have to work because the guy really knows everything.
18.7.
But when you wrote the book,
Actually, I'm going to change that to 1.4. So then it'll be within a millimeter, and that math works out right, and it's correct. Well, that's what I wrote in. Okay, no, I was thinking it was 1.5. No, it's 1.4. No, I was right the first time. It's fine. So it's not a problem.
Probably from the
Okay, the next thing I calculate is the rim depth to diameter ratio. So you take 1.4 and divide 21.4, so it'll be 6.5%. So that's fine, it's over 5, so that passes on that one, and I knew it would.
just shoot pictures.
So this is actually the actual approval of the disc.
Yes, yeah, this is the last one I got to test, so I brought it up here from Tucson. Okay, the next test, most of them take a little more time, but usually I skip over to do the rim thickness first. Or not the rim thickness, flight place thickness.
Did they shoot those? Did they shoot the Chicago pictures?
Oh, one thing I didn't set it just right. One thing when you start using a micrometer, you want the zero to line up, and then you use this ratchet, and it tightens it down, so you're starting right from zero. This one I found it's actually designed for measuring sheet metal thickness, so it's more of a discrete. Discs are a little squishier, so I can't do it quite as accurately as they can, but I do it way more accurate than I need to. They can, I think they say that an experienced person can do it to like 0.3 microns. But most people can't do it quite that well. I'm talking on sheet metal. You know, on a disc, you know, I probably get it within a couple or so, which is not bad. You know. So anyway, it's zeroed out, so I'm going to get it ready to do the test. You was going to do that.
It was a boatload of work. Trying to just get one here. It wasn't.
Can someone hold that for me? I knew that you normally do it right there. Just hold the disc. I'm just going to
Be like this.
want to be able to put this in the video.
In the video, so
Your star.
I want to just so that wall would be like that.
I usually try to go pretty close to the center, but I try not to do it right where there's a hot stand. Something kind of because it's a little squishy, I kind of go back and forth till I see that it pretty much stops at a pretty consistent place. I'm not quite there.
You didn't see him today? Did you see him?
One thing, let loose and see if I can pick it up. See, I know I'm pushing in too high, so if it's doing that, I'll back off a little bit and get it really close as I can. So it comes out 2.10 millimeters.
That's what we have.
This isn't really published online because I didn't used to be able to measure it this accurately, but I have been for about 2 or 3 years. And I don't know, I mean, I'd like to have it for all the discs. But, you know, it takes a lot of time to pull out, you know, a couple thousand discs, older discs, and get all those measurements. So I'd like to do it, but it's not a high priority for me. But someday, hopefully, I can do that. Okay.
That's what he was talking about. Yeah, they outgas in different plastics.
So 210.
Additives.
And then there was one term that I defined, but it was really because of discs like the 10-meter brick that had like that really thick end part on the flight plate. I came up with a measure that they, even at the bottommost part of that, it has to be at least 5 millimeters above another term I defined. I didn't define that many terms, but one is called the rim plane. It's the it'd be like if you set a disc on a table, it's the point where it comes into contact with it. That's a plane right there. And so I measure from the bottom of the flight plate to that, but I couldn't do it that accurately without this micrometer, because the old way I would do it, I would stick a ruler across it and then I'd measure down with the ruler, and I'm within a millimeter, but that's not close enough. Not when something's 2 millimeters. It's really not close enough. So anyway, that's what I use for that. And I don't even need to check it with the radius gauge, but just to show you what it looks like. It's a lot smaller than it looked like in the logo. It's that's a semicircle that's an 1/8 of an inch across, because the radius is 16, so you got the diameter. But you can obviously see that when you put that there, you see a lot of white going through it, so it passes. If I saw it, it's not really supposed to touch all the way in, but one thing you've seen that I've kind of allowed some of those discs to do it is, what if they're not really centered right there? What if on the edge it's kind of angled down? I know that's not as dangerous as one that's sharp and angled straight out, so if it's hitting down on the bottom, I've usually allowed it, but not if there's a gap on the bottom of the top. It still has to butt within that semicircle. Okay, so it passed that. It's just a pass-fail. And I round you subtract 2 millimeters from 21 millimeters, which was the height of one of the discs. Then that puts us to 1.9 centimeters for the distance from the flight plate to the lower rim plane. And the other two, 1.9, so that would be 1.7. Those aren't published online, but I've been collecting that data for a long time. Okay, so we're to the most time-consuming test at the end now, and that's the flex test and the rim configuration. I guess I can start with
about the weight.
We'll do the flex. What's that?
The weight of the disc.
Well, there's a weight limit.
Right, but you put it on a scale to see if it matches.
I often do, but normally I don't, unless I suspect that it might be. There is a limit, and if it's above that, it doesn't pass. But
It's quite an ancient scale you have there.
this is the original one. Stork got this and gave it to me back in '93, I guess. Yeah, 30 years ago. Time flies. But well, one thing that you need to do is check the temperature of the disc. It's probably not a problem in here, because we know that the temperature affects the flex of a disc. But the highest temperature that we can measure it at is 77 degrees or 25 degrees Celsius, 77 Fahrenheit. But let me just check it. 75.5, that's pretty good. 75.8. I think I'm close enough, and I can almost, once you've done this enough, I can just do a little flex and I'll almost know. I'll know if it, I may not know exactly if it passed, but most of the time I can tell. I can tell this one will pass. But the way I do this, I have a very scientific piece of equipment here. Actually, that's a joke.
The joke is you can't find it.
Well, I know these aren't the most sophisticated implements for testing, but, Ed, his philosophy was that the money should come in, and he wanted to pay an outside company to do the testing. And I even looked into it to see what would they charge for that. And the most rigorous is like Underwriters Laboratory, and they wouldn't even look at anything for less than 10,000 then. Then no one company's gonna pay 10,000 per disc to have it done. It just wouldn't be practical.
How much does it cost? Does it cost anything?
I think it costs a lot more than that now, probably closer to 20,000, but I haven't looked into
Yeah,
it. For Underwriters Laboratory,
For example, Kivina,
For-
the Clash,
that would be $300
to get it approved.
to get it tested.
Oh, okay.
It may fail, but they still pay that.
Okay, but $300 compared to. And
It's not that much. The bigger companies think it should be raised significantly, I think.
Of course they do.
You know, they want to have the major players, you know, be kind of limit, you know, to them. I mean, some of them don't mind if it's way raised, like 10 times. So it's anyway, I do think it should be raised, but I don't think what they want. I proposed their fees to be raised last year, and Joe shot it down. We haven't raised the fees in 14 years. Just on inflation alone, we should be raising it. I was saying we should change it to 500 for the disc and the target both. It's 150 though for a company in their first year making PDGA approved discs. And I was actually for eliminating that because I don't think it's a game breaker anymore. You know, that's not very much money. It's almost nothing. You know, to know the truth. This kind of business. But, well, I don't think I had my piece of paper, but I'll just make one. I had something that was actually better. My friend Ben Vosper made me some little wooden things that are like every millimeter, so that what you do on the flex test, what you're trying to do. And this was the part that I helped with Stork is, you know, when he came up with this part on the flex test, all he had convenient to him, he knew he didn't want to double it over because discs don't really double over when they hit things. I mean, they may double over halfway or something, but he had a 3.5-inch diskette, so that tells you, in 1993, it was by his computer, so he just used that. And I said, Stork, discs vary in this inside diameter, so I think it should vary depending on how big the discs are. So what I said is we just make something so that we can bend it over to that point and then take whatever that number is. So you can do this with just a piece of paper. It's nothing difficult. When I look about where it is, let's see if I still like it there. Nope, I need to come back a little bit more. That's pretty good. Then I just check it at the end and see if it's really still, and I go right to the center point of the disc. See, that's pretty good. I'm within a millimeter. That's that. Start with the number 1. Yeah, for this I write it down on just a piece of paper and then I transfer the numbers onto the form. So the way I do that is I do each disc 3 times and then I take the median number of those for that particular disc, and then I take the median of all 3 in the end, and then the median of that is what the number is. You know. So for the number 1, you need to make sure it's set on 0, but it should be. Yeah, it's close. It's pretty close. And you just set it here, and I'll do this so you can see this, but I really try to look very directly on, and then it's the highest number I see by the time I've come to halfway double over. And it's a big difference for like a Whammo disc with the real thin brim. What they do is you'll reach a peak, and then the disc kind of buckle and then it goes down. But almost all bevel discs, the numbers are the highest right at the very end. You know, so I mean, you know, we considered other things like shore hardness. That's what Hedrick thought we should be using. And I looked at it, and maybe I wasn't good enough. I didn't get a good enough repeatable results. And I thought that if I got a good regression, if I could predict from the flex data that I already had, and if I could just do the shore hardness and one could predict the other, the shore hardness would have been a lot easier, and I wouldn't even have to do the flex test, but it didn't match up, so it wasn't a good predictor. So this is how I do it. But it's a reasonable one. It's maybe not the most scientific in a way, but it does take into account both the plastic formulation, but also the geometry of the disc. because the rim thickness has a really big effect
You get
on
really
that
trophies.
flex. Really, I do it more like this with one hand. When I first did it, can you read what that number is, Henry?
15.
15, 8 ounces, 15 pounds, 8 ounces.
Yeah.
As you can see it better, I usually get positioned myself.
That's pretty good.
15,
Okay, then I rotate it and do it a different direction. See,
15, 12.
okay, it's higher.
It was a little bit higher.
So that's that's my error, but it's experimental or statistics.
Gotta have replicates, man.
6. So about around 16.
Okay, well let me write all those numbers down. Did you remember?
The highest I saw was 16,
Was it
and
15.8 was the first one?
Yeah.
So at 15.5, I just do it in decimals, and then the next one was 16.
16. Sure.
The next two?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have 216, so I'll circle a 16, and then you just convert it to kilograms. So it comes out 7.27. Anyone know what the weight limit is? Or not the weight limit, the flex limit?
No.
It's actually more of a rigidity limit in a way, but we call it the flex test. But it was 27 pounds originally, and so that comes out really close to 12.25 kilograms, and so that's the number. So I think it actually is 12.27. Close enough. So I got that one done. Let's move to the next one. Try to do these a little quicker. If you can just.
We'll use this as a background.
15, 12. 16, 4. 16, 4.
Okay. The first one was 1512, you said? Okay, so that's 15.75 decimals. And then
16, 4.
16, so that's 16.25. We round it to the nearest quarter.
And the same on the last one.
Okay, so that's that number again. The last one, so 16.25. That's 7.39. That's not too far off. Okay, now we have one more to go. Number 3. Oh, I had that. I misplaced it. I had to create a whole new instrument. Actually, the ones Ben made, I donated them to the PDGA because I went there in late
17, yeah. That was 17.
September last year to train like 4 people and have to do all the testing in a couple of days. So at least, if I were to pass away, I don't want the PDGA left in the lurch because it could be pretty disruptive unless other people know really what I do. One more.
Yep.
17 also.
17, 4.
Maybe more.
17.
Okay, 17 all the way across, huh?
No, 7. Yeah.
Yeah, the one of those was tad over, but 17.
Okay,
Be nice
well, we round
average
it
for
to the
sure.
nearest quarter pound, so 17 17 divided 2.2, 7.73 by rounding. And then I'll take the middle one, and that's the number. It'll be 7.39, but I write all the numbers down on the form. So 7.27, 7.39, 7.73.
You don't know yet?
No.
So the
Soon to
middle
find
number
out.
is 7.39.
Looks like.
Okay, the next one's kind of a weird test, but
Scientists.
it's the reason why Stork thought we needed both, and I gave in on it. It made sense to me.
You plug it in.
Oh, did I unplug something?
No, I don't think it ever got plugged in.
Yeah.
Oh,
we ran the extension
It's
cord.
right behind you to the right of you. The orange one. There you go.
okay. This is the second one I've used because I broke one of them.
Something I feel like I'm a part of it.
Yeah, the other one turned, my old one was this way. I used to like that better, but anyway, it's a magnifier on it.
Wow, we're here.
This is used for like people that do crafts and stuff, hobby people, and it just, worked out pretty well because I needed to be able to see this a little bit better. What I'm going to do here is the rim configuration test. So I try to flatten it a little bit, and I don't center it because I find that if I do it where it's asymmetrical, I get a better measurement. What you do is you push it in on one side. This is called a contour gauge, and then it creates an image of what the disc is on the other side, but it's stylized in steps. And what I do is
Three discs had like a picture with the blue in it.
I only do this for one disc because they're not going to really vary between these, and it's really a matter of whether it's like pass fail. And
You don't want a root beer knurl?
here's the trivia question: does anybody know what disc we used as the limit where we set the standard for the rim configuration? You probably won't know, but it's
I remember. I mean, I know, but I don't remember.
it's the Eclipse from Discraft because that was the sharpest disc in 1993. There was nothing sharper. So we wanted to, say that we're going to allow that, but we didn't want it to get any far past that, because, it's not necessarily that it makes them that much more dangerous, but there's no question. But a disc that's heavier, stiffer, sharper, it's going to be more dangerous.
It's like throwing a high speed.
Exactly, And then what I do, I use this
You want to change
piece of tape, but the old way I originally did this, it's not really what Stork came up with, but at my office, I would stick this on a photocopier. I was real careful when I put it on the platen so I didn't scratch it, and then I took a Xerox copy of it. And then what I did is from the outermost edge, I measured in 5 millimeters and drew a line perpendicular. And then I go and measure each individual pin to the nearest quarter of a millimeter.
Basically, you're going to see
And then I sum those up. And when you do that, the Eclipse came out 26 on that test. So that's really why we came up with that. On the Flex, we figured that some medicine needed to be taken, and there were some discs, condors and things like that were really stiff. And we said some of those just couldn't be that stiff. And so we set that to where some couldn't be used, but the disc can still be used. They just make it in different plastic. Fine. Actually, that doesn't look right. I'm going to check it because the other thing I do when I push it in,
Send me some of these
and I
pictures.
didn't do this before,
It'd be great.
I want to make sure they're abutting right against it, and so I'll even press against these pins and make sure that they're really touching up against the disc.
Some of them, but the purge.
I don't do this just right, it will throw these off, and I could tell I had a little, kind of a level spot that I knew didn't exist there.
You want to wait so you can dream about it? Is that going to be?
So first I just eyeball it and then measure and see how close I came, and then I just adjust it. First, the edge of the tape has to be 5 millimeters from the
That's the
edge.
one he does with
The
that.
one color I don't have. Well, of course I don't have that. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, it's right on. I usually get it almost the first time. Sometimes it takes me 2 or 3.
Was it chartreuse instead of?
No, 4 or 5 millimeters pretty well. So now I'm going to start writing or adding these down. Can somebody help me and write them down as I go? Right here where it says rim configuration, just write down the numbers in order. And then we'll sum those up.
No worries.
I'll start on one side.
Thanks, Jeff.
See you.
No.
Oh, Kelsey. Let's see. Okay, 0.75.
Here, I'll hold it for you, and I'll hold the light so you can take a picture of it. Okay, let's put.
2.25.
But if you look here,
3.75.
raised edge goes all the way around there, around there, around there,
4.5.
around there. So So it's the most complete roped or knurled edge.
4.75,
Striated,
5,
injector, and it's true root beer.
5.
There is no red anywhere in the rim.
4.5.
Besides that, it's just your run-of-the-mill.
It's just your everyday, it is warped too. And part of that,
4,
other ones that I've seen with this.
3.75,
I think it's just a faded red.
So you want a picture with it?
3.25, 2.
If you shoot down, there's the whitest part of it.
I'll just add them all up, and then that's the number right there.
I'll take a picture. You just gotta promise to send me the pictures. Well, up against that really, really looks
Frisbees
good.
possibly in existence? Is that possible?
No, figure out how to do this.
I said, are they?
Yeah.
This is it?
That's a $10,000.
There we go. Yeah, $10,000 disc. I noticed somebody said, how much was it? And you ignored the question. The most ever.
43.50.
Anything else?
Tells you, that's like in the mid-range level for
This is just, that's not supposed to be.
fine. Okay.
No, but I mean, it's showing nobody.
And I just assume that all of them are that.
Okay, they got a cheat.
The most important thing is that we know that it passes. And I should say too that when you do this, you can end up with slightly different numbers between it. I always give them the best advantage to it. And so what I'll do, if I have a sharp disc, I'll do the same thing and I'll do it 10 times all the way across, and I'll look for the one that looks like it gives them the best chance. All they have to do is pass once, but as long as I'm making sure it butts it. And the reason it varies is just think about it. Sometimes, just depending exactly how I push it in, sometimes it can be an even number and sometimes an odd number. If I do this repeatedly, they can vary between them. So if you have one more number, you can get a higher one. But, so I always do it to their advantage. So if I can get one that's 26, then it'll pass. But as long as I'm really happy with that being a good number, that is done right. This sometimes I have to do it multiple times.
It's a story.
But this one was pretty easy because I already knew it was going to pass before I started. You could tell that. What's that?
I said, being a video?
Oh, we're live. There's people watching.
Okay, so anyway, you can see that it passes. And I think it's going to be 23. Anyway, it's one of the first ones in the second half of the year. I think I've done 3 or 4 since then. If you want to see it, then what the form and what the data looks like, that's it.
Everybody's seen this, but you just want to touch it. Did they pass muster?
It passes.
Okay, good. Where's my?
I kind of knew it did. I hadn't taken the measurements, but I really didn't want to come here with one that would fail because I don't want to embarrass the companies, But I knew that it would pass flex without really checking.
Oh yeah,
I knew
you could see it.
sharpness,
Well, thank you very much. It was cool to see it actually in process. I've known about it for years, obviously, but
Was it always wondered how
yeah. Well, using the micrometers and stuff. That's
I
use all that
just
for
a few years
aircraft.
ago. Yeah, I
I had
know
all
all
that
kinds of
with-
stuff. I'm sure you use much more sophisticated equipment,
yeah.
but we wanted it to be so that these companies can do the test too. So they should be
And like
before
you
they
said,
say
having
I
other
know they
people
don't.
learning how to do it.
Thank you
is
so
cool.
much. That was awesome. So nice to see. Thanks.
Can I ask you a question?
Where are you from?
I'm from Finland.
No way.